Okay, so recording is on. I request everyone to write their information in the chat box, the city or the country they're dialing in from, and what kind of job role they are in, what kind of company they're working with. If you can share that information in the chat box, that will be a great information to start with. And we will just start our session in a couple of minutes. Okay, great. So I can see messages flowing in. Shubham is working with Nokia based out of Bangalore. What about others? Okay, John comes from 5G data network, East Coast of US. Okay, great. Minu joining in from Iran, Tehran, working with the MVNO company as a core manager. Welcome, Don, for the session, joining in the session. Okay, Hanif is joining in from India, from True Minds. Anugrah from Vodafone India. Right, great. Okay, so Harshit is from KPMG, GRCS Telecom. Raja comes from Avenue, working as a tech manager. Sunil is from Rakuten Symphony. Awesome. Right, so we have people joining in from all parts of the world, working in different time zone. I'm just starting my video for a brief moment, and then I will stop it just to save the bandwidth for all of us. I hope you are able to see me and able to hear me clearly, as well as able to see my screen. With your permission, I'm just starting with the discussion, and greetings everyone. According to your time zone, I know you are taking time out on the weekend, on the Friday morning or evening. Thanks for joining in. I'm sure this session is going to be a helpful session for you, even if you don't wish to pay my, join my paid session. So I will be taking some brief time talking about one of my paid session, what I'm starting next week. Right, but it's pretty okay if you don't want to join that, and I will make sure that even if you don't join that course, this session, what you spend here, maybe another 15 minutes, what you spend here, are going to be helpful for you. Right. So with this, keeping that in mind, I'm just stopping my video and continuing my session. At any point of time, if you have any questions, please feel free to type those questions in the chat box. Right. I will be taking those questions at the end of the session. My name is Sanjay Kumar, and I am a founder of a company called Telco. We are primarily into training and consulting for telecom, 5G, 6G, etc. Right. This session, what I'm starting with the 5G core deep dive, where we are going to do the detailed protocol analysis and some kind of lab setups. This is my fourth batch what I'm running, but in the last three batches, I got a lot of feedbacks from the participants. I got a lot of learnings as well, and I made some few mistakes. We are all human beings, so we make mistakes as well. So I'm just learning from those feedbacks, etc. And now what we are trying to do is we are trying to revamp our program. So this fourth batch is going to be very different than the first three batches what we had, right? What are going to be the differences? How it is going to be different? We are going to talk about by the end of the session. But before that, we will do some kind of quick learning. What about, about 5G core? What are the things in the 5G core and things like that? Now, second. Okay. So what we are going to discuss in this session, we will, first of all, we'll start with the evolution of EPC to 5G core network. We'll talk about service-based architecture, stack and interfaces. What is the SBA architecture? When I was talking about this 5G core, many people came up with a question saying that, okay, are you going to discuss L1, L2, L3 in 5G core? So frankly speaking, this L1, L2, L3 are all IP related protocol. What matters in the service-based architecture is the topmost protocol, which is typically going to be the HTTP2 and the content carried by HTTP2, right? So the L1, L2, L3 things are more relevant when we talk about the radio network, where we have RLC, MAC, PDCP layer. But this is a core network course, so where we'll talk about more about the network functions and their communication, etc. We will be talking about some interfaces like N1, N2, N3, N4, etc., and the protocols running on these interfaces. We will have a brief discussion about UE registration, and then we will talk about PDU session establishment. This part we will not be covering in our course and in our session as of now. Now, just to talk about our association and affiliation, I come with around 22 years of experience, where I've spent around 17 years into training. The Telco Learn, the company what I'm running, is having a lot of associations. So we are a partner to Bharat 6G Alliance. We are a member of Voice Consortium, which is a Voice of India Comtech Enterprise. We are a part of Telecom Center of Excellence. I am on their 6G evaluation panel, so where we analyze the proposals coming from the companies who are working on 5G, 6G kind of tech. We are a designated startup by Government of India, and we are also part of Microsoft for Startup Founders Hub. A little bit about me, as I mentioned, 22 years of work experience, 17 years of training experience, worked with almost all the technologies, starting from wireline to 2G, 3G, 4G, 5G. One of the early days I worked with the GPRS kind of technology, which were the stepping stone for the 4G and 5G kind of technologies. When it comes to products, I worked with Samsung, Nokia, Ericsson, ZTE, Cisco, these kind of products in my career. These are the companies I've trained in. Globally, I have traveled and trained people in 50 plus countries, more than 120, 130 trips. These are the universities and the colleges where I've trained entry-level engineers. These are some of the links in the end of the session, right, where we will, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I write a lot of content on LinkedIn. So I'll share those links in the end of the session. In addition to this, the program what I'm talking about, we do a lot of corporate trainings as well. So if you wish to, plan some training program for your entry-level engineers, either freshers or laterals, we can offer some customized training programs for them as well. If you need any further information, please visit www.telcolearn.com. A few points to note, few housekeeping rules. So I have muted all the people as of now. But if you have any questions, please feel free to drop those questions in the chat box. Please type your questions, and we will have a question and answer session at the end of the discussion. I will be uploading this recording of this video on YouTube, and I will be sharing that link with all the people who have joined in. If you need any additional information, please write an email to info@telcolearn.com or visit www.telcolearn.com. Now, jobs in telecoms are changing in a big way. Now, if we talk about jobs, the way jobs were around 10 years back, where we just need to learn the technologies like 2G, 3G, 4G. But in last 5-10 years, the telecom jobs have completely moved to the cloud kind of infrastructure. So now, if you're working in a telecom industry, you also need to learn at least the fundamentals or some kind of basic deployments on the cloud architecture. This cloud architecture can be some kind of private cloud, and this can be some kind of public cloud as well. And they come with a lot of different technologies, and it is applicable not only for the core network, even though we are primarily talking about the core network. But if you look at both core network and radio networks are moving into the cloud infrastructure, cloud native infrastructure, I would say. Now, similar to this, this is something which has happened in last 10 years. And today what we see is most of our networks are built on the cloud infrastructure. Similarly, in next 5-10 years, we also see the similar intervention of artificial intelligence. So recently we did a webinar on that as well. If you wish to know more about it, what AI is and how this is going to be used in telecommunication, you can actually check that video on our YouTube channel, and the link of that I will be sharing in a short while. Now, let us get started with our discussion, which is the original agenda for our session today, where we are talking about evolved packet core to the 5G core network. The EPC, or the evolved packet core network, was originally a purpose-built hardware based on the purpose-built software, where all these things were coming from some vendors, and all these products, they were not coming as a network function, they're coming as a product from those companies in the early releases of 4G. But in the later releases, we also did some changes in 4G architecture, where we brought in some features like virtual EPC, where we can implement EPC in the virtualized environment. We brought in CUPS architecture, which is called as control plane and user plane separation architecture. And we also brought in some functionality called as decor and e-decor. Decor and e-decor. Have you ever heard about it? Any of you? Have you heard about decor and e-decor? If yes, write yes in the chat box. And if you know a bit about it, please write that in the chat box. So decor stands for dedicated core network, and e-decor stands for the enhanced dedicated core network. And some of these things have paved the way for the future generation, which is typically going to be the 5th generation of the network, right? So what I'm trying to convey here is, even though when we talk about EPC, we talk about MME, HEW, PGW, and we talk about HSS, etc. There were a lot of intermediate features which were introduced in 4G itself, which were stepping stone for the 5G network. Now, what are the typical limitations? So this is the LTEPC network architecture, where we talk about E node B, MME, HEW, HSS, MME, PCRF, PGW. We are not going to talk about all these details here. However, in our course, we typically talk about all these network functions, the interfaces, the procedure related to LTE, etc. So we typically do all these things. And here we are talking about some of the limitation of MME, or I would say EPC, and how we are going to address that. So if we take an example of MME runs a diameter protocol towards HSS, S1AP towards E node B, GTPC towards HEW, SGS-AP towards MS. So this is not GTC, this is GTPC protocol, SGS-AP towards MSCBLR. So these are multiple protocols that were used in the 5G core network. However, we are trying to create a uniformity in the 5G core network protocol, and that's where we are bringing in a new architecture called as service-based architecture, and we will be talking about that in the upcoming slides. The 4G networks were pretty close networks, right? So they were typically, having very, very limited APIs to the external world. So basically, what we can do here is we have this limitation. Where you can't really expose your capability to the outside world, the third-party services. But in case of later versions of 5G, we have something called as SCEF, Service Capability Exposure Function, which is now evolved into a new entity in 5G called as NEF, Network Exposure Function, right? So basically, this is something which we are trying to address in case of 5G with the new network function called as Network Exposure Function. The third thing, the gateway selection was very inflexible. You cannot connect to two different HEW, two different PGW. Some of these things were, got sorted when we implemented CUPS architecture, control plane and user plane separation, but still there were limitations. In case of 5G, we have done clear separation between the control plane and user plane, specifically from the PDU session perspective. Right. What is the meaning of that? We will see that in the upcoming section. The architecture of 4G initially, as I mentioned earlier, it was completely hardware-based architecture. They were coming as a product from the vendors. However, at a later stage, we did some kind of changes, and we also implemented something called as VEPC, or virtual EPC, virtual evolved packet core network. Right. So this is something. These were some of the limitations what we had in 4G network, what we are trying to address in the 5G network. Now, This was the packet core in the 5G network, and we are making some major architectural changes where at the level of MME, we are bringing in AMF, access and mobility management function. At the level of HGW and PGW control plane, we talk about SMF. At the level of user plane part of it, we bring in UPF, the PCF, replacing the PCRF, and your HSS becomes AUSF, UDM, UDR kind of functionality. When I'm saying this, please make a note that even though I'm saying they are similar, they are not same. So that is just to create a comparison between the 4G and 5G network architecture. There are significant differences in how MME is created and implemented and how AMF is implemented. How SGW and PGW implemented and how SMF is implemented. There are significant differences. There are significant differences, right? However, there are some similarity. There are some similarity between these network functions. This is one of the picture which like comes into our discussion as a reference point architecture. But what we need to understand here is this is just for the reference. If we talk about interfaces like N1, N2, N3, N9, N4, N6, this architecture still have some relevance. But if we talk about all these network interfaces, there is absolutely no meaning in the real communication. Even though we still use those interfaces as a reference, there is absolutely no meaning of these interfaces in the real world communication. And what is the reason for that? I'm going to explain that in the very next slide. So these are some of the abbreviation of these network functions and what are their functionality. So I'm not going to getting into the details of each and every network functions and their functionality, but the interesting point here is now all these network functions, what you see here, they are connected to each other. First of all, they are not separate pieces of hardware. If you want, you can implement it. If you want, you can implement it, right? But they are not separated pieces of hardware. They're typically built on a 𝐂𝐸 architecture, which can be based off public cloud, which can be based off private cloud. Public cloud, for example, Dish Wireless in US, they have deployed their infrastructure on AWS. However, other operators, they are doing it, they are building their own data center and doing it. So it is operator choice how they want to do it, right? The second thing is, all these network functions are not really created as a single monolithic architecture. They are broken down into smaller services called as microservices. And these microservices are nothing but some kind of RESTful APIs. So what we are actually seeing here on this picture, right? These are not really the network function, but collection of microservices, right? And as per release 17 of 3GPP, there are 28 network functions. So if you see in this picture, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But in reality, there are 28 different network functions introduced till release 17. And put together, they have 102 APIs. 102 APIs. What is the meaning of this API? How this API file looks like? We are going to talk about it in a short while. So basically, all the network functions, what you see here are collection of multiple APIs, and they are all communicating to each other in the protocols like HTTP2. Excuse me. Now, how they really communicate, how these network functions are going to communicate. Anugrah, yes. So most of these microservices are hosted on some kind of container. So that's the right statement. Now, what are the typical communication we have between these network functions? So basically, they're lower layers. So if somebody is asking, hey, can you talk about layer 1, layer 2, layer 3 in 5G core network? You need not to go in a different way. You have to just talk about TCP/IP protocol stack. You just need to talk about TCP/IP protocol stack. However, What makes it different is here we are not using HTTP2 protocol, even though it resides at the application layer. We are not really using this as application layer protocol, but this is used to transport your JSON information. Now, what is JSON information? So JSON is typically a way of writing your 3GPP information, writing your 3GPP data into the format, into a serialized format, which can be carried over a HTTP body. So basically, the JSON will allow me to write my 3GPP related stuff into the HTTP related content, the content which can be carried into the HTTP body. So that is the reason. So we are using RESTful API based communication where we are using HTTP2 protocol commands like put, get, delete, which is nothing but CRUD kind of procedure, create, read, update, delete kind of procedure. The data is carried, not really the protocol, but the serialization of the data is done by the JSON, called as JavaScript object notation, and where we are using HTTP protocol to transport JSON format messages in the RESTful API style. What is the meaning of all these things? What is the meaning of all these things? This is something we are going to discuss in the upcoming slides, right? So all these network functions, they work like a client and server. One of the network function works like a producer. Another network functions works like a consumer, right? And every producer provides some services. Every consumer consumes some services. And any network function can be producer. Any network function can be consumer. Typically, they will require some additional components like NRF to communicate with each other. Right. So basically, we will have a yellow pages, we will have a NF repository function, which will help these network function to, which will help the consumers to discover the producers, and which will help the producers to publish their information in a repository function. Right. So this architecture is slightly different than what we used to have in the previous generation of network, like 4G, etc. Right. So this is a slightly different kind of architecture what we are using in the 5G network. Now, how these network functions are created. So as I mentioned earlier, the AMF, SMF, etc., they are typically a collection of microservices. So these are the 4 microservices or 4 APIs which are available with the AMF. There are 2 more added in the later releases. These are just for an example. So like this, there are 102 APIs available. Like this, there are 102 API available, which are typically Open API 3.0 YAML files. Right. Now, how this typical file looks like, if I open this file, so these are 4 different services which are provided by AMF. There are 2 more to it. If I open up this one NAMF communication file, right? So I'm talking about only one file here. In the left side, you will see the YAML file with the content written in the JSON format, and this is opened by using a Swagger editor, online editor. This is a more of a YAML file editor. You can do it online, you can do it online, you can do it offline. Whereas I've just used a online editor where I have opened one file which is called as NAMF communication. Right. All these things what we are discussing here are typically, we talk about all these things in our paid course where we talk about not all of them, but some of these important files, their functionality, their methods, what they use. So we typically talk about all these, communication in our course. These services, or I'll say these service names, are typically further broken down into lot of service operations. They are also broken down into several service operations, comes with operation semantics, and they also have some kind of known consumers, right? That means under this service name, there are multiple different service operations available. What type of operation semantics they have? It can be either request or response, or it can be subscribe or notify. And this also defines what are the typical consumers who can consume these services. All these things are stated in the 3GPP documentation 23.502. So if you need to know more about all these services and their functionality, you can refer to this particular document. Now, coming to N1, N2, N3, and N4 protocol. Now, in N1 is typically a new name given to the NAS communication. What NAS stands for? Known Access Stratum. What NAS stands for? Known Access Stratum, right? So the NAS communication is typically the communication from the UE to the AMF. The NAS communication comes from the UE till the AMF, UE to AMF. The N2 is the communication which is happening between the G node B and AMF carried over a protocol called as NGAP protocol. And the N3 is the interface which is happening from G node B to the SOPF using GTP-U protocol. GTP, GPR signaling protocol, user plane part, right? The N4 is a communication. The N4 is a communication between SMF and UPF. Now, just a question for all of you. What do you think? N4 interface. N4 interface is a control plane interface or a user plane interface? N4 interface is a control plane or a user plane interface. What do you think? I'll request everyone to write the answer in the chat box. Control plane or user plane? N4 interface. Okay, so I see most of the answers. It says control plane, control plane, control plane. And the answer is right, but not completely right. But because we also have a possibility, for some specific requirements, for some specific use cases, we also need to implement. So I see Kranti writing up as CP plus UP. That's the right answer. So we also have some specific use cases where we need to implement user plane on the N4 interface. What are those use cases? We are not getting into those details as of now. Now, these are some of the comparisons between the terminology between 4G and 5G. So IMEI becomes PEI, MSISN becomes GPSI, IMSI number becomes SUPI or SUKI. MME is similar to AMF, HGW, PGW control plane as SMF, HGW, PGW user plane as UPF, HSS is broken down into multiple pieces like UDM, AUSF, UDR, not exactly same, but similar. PCRF is given a new name called as PCF, bearer is QoS flow, PDN connection is PDU session, PDN is DN, and APN is called as data network name or DNN. As a note, while they are very similar, but they are not exactly same. That is what we have talked about earlier as well. Now, in the UE registration part of it, now there are some basic differences in the UE registration of 4G and 5G. When we do this UE registration in 4G and 5G network, we have some differences. In 4G, what you do is when you do the UE registration, in the very first registration, you always share your IMSI number. In 5G, it is not mandatory to share your permanent identity, what is SUPI, but you use a concealed version of it as called as SUCI, SUCI. That is one. The second difference is in 4G, during registration, it is mandatory to create a default bearer. You always create a default bearer. In 5G, creating a default PDU session is not mandatory. So it is not mandatory. You can just do the registration and leave with it without creating a bearer. In case of 4G, the MME takes care of the final decision for authentication. Even though the information is supplied by the home network, the final decision is taken by the MME. However, in 5G, home network also have another level of control. On the authentication. So we do two levels of authentication in the 5G network. So these are the three things which are mentioned on this particular slide. Now, if I talk about this complete procedure, this will be at least 10 different slides, but just to keep it short, so initially UE is sending a NAS registration request to the radio network. The radio network will do the G node B. The radio network here means the G node B. The G node B is going to do the selection. G node B is going to do the selection for the AMF on some criteria. And then it will be sending that NAS message to the AMF. Now, depending on the information provided by the user, either it is SUKI or GUTI, these can have 8 or 10 different options. What I'm trying to convey here is, even though I'm explaining UE registration procedure, as a single procedure, it typically have 8 to 10 different versions, depending on the different architectures and different identities provided by the user. Now, at this level, the radio access network sends it to AMF, and if required, AMF talks to the AUSF, AUSF talks to the UDM, and UDM talks to the UDR, and that happens for doing the authentication and authorization, which is typically referred as AKA. A stands for authentication and KA stands for the key agreement. KA stands for the key agreement. The NAS security, it takes care of the security setup, the key agreements, which typically creates a lot of NAS key and AS keys, access security keys. Those keys will be used to do the NAS security and AS security, specifically the encryption and the integrity check. And in addition to that, AMF will also talk to the PCF for taking care of the UE policy. Please note, this is not the complete procedure. This is not the complete procedure. This is just a very, very high level detail of how the UE registration looks like. Now, in a short while, we will open some Wireshark logs and we will see, how this procedure actually looks like in the network. Similar to this, we have PDU session establishment. PDU sessions, which can connect via one or different data network, can be via 3GPP, can be via non 3GPP, and can connect via different set of 5G core network functions. So this is typically involves AMF. AMF does the SMF selection and interacts with SMF, and SMF interacts with the PCF for policy management, interacts with the UDM for subscription data management, and interacts with the UPF for PFCP association and maintaining the user plane. Once all these things are done, it will do the SMF and AMF interaction as well. And finally, your PDU session resource setup request will be completed and your PDU session establishment will be completed. Now, how these things will look like in the Wireshark log, let me just try to explain it. Okay, just give me a minute. So if you see, these are the various protocol logs we have got here, where I'm just opening one of the file, which is the initial registration. And now I am adding some kind of filters here. Right. So if you see all these messages, what we are talking about, the NG setup procedure happening between the G node B and AMF, the NAS message, which is coming from the UE to G node B and G node B to AMF, called as initial UE message with the registration request, the communication happening between AMF and NRF response, communication happening between AMF to AUSF, communication happening between AUSF to NRF response, communication happening between AUSF and UDM, communication happening between UDM to NRF response, and then communication happening from UDM to UDR, and then the various responses. And finally, the authentication request, which is going to the user, and the authentication response, which is coming back from the user. So this is typically the the protocol logs or the procedures, what we do for the initial registration. Similarly, what we can see here is the another one, which is the PDU session establishment. Okay. So the PDU session establishment, now we are doing more or less the similar thing what we have discussed here. But after this, after we go down, we will also see the communication happening between the PFCP, the SMF and the UPF, basically creating a PFCP association, and with that, we are actually sending the PDU session resource setup response, which is typically sending a message to the user that your PDU session establishment request is completed. Now, in our sessions, we typically talk about all these protocol logs pretty much in detail on the step-by-step basis. And we also, build some labs which are going to be available with you, and you will be able to take out these logs and analyze these logs. Right. Now, this is something what we had in this session. Let me see. Okay. Okay. Right. Now, this is something what we had in the session. So that's all what we wanted to understand and what we wanted to learn here. Now, I will be talking a bit about my the course what I'm coming up with. Before that, what we will do is we will take up any questions if you have related we talked about, and if not, I will just spend maybe 10 minutes to talk about my course, and if you need any further details, please feel free to send me a message. Right. Just before we do it, let me allow me to do a couple of things. Let me send you some kind of information. Give me a minute. Okay. 1 second. Right. So I'm just sharing the link, my LinkedIn profile. So if you wish to connect to me on LinkedIn, you can do that. Or if you want to see the recording of this session, you can see that on the YouTube channel. So I'm uploading that on the YouTube channel tomorrow morning, and you will be able to see that there. Right. So I've shared those links in the chat box, and let me see if we have got any questions in the chat box. Right. So any questions from anyone before I just talk about in the upcoming course what I've got? Any questions? Okay. Right. So coming to the course what I'm talking about. Right. So this is a course which is starting next week on Saturday. Right. I will be having this session from 11 to 1 p.m. IST. Okay, Don, give me a minute. Let me just allow me 5 minutes. I'll talk about it and then I'll take the questions. Right. So 11 to 1 p.m. IST, the India Standard Time. And if we get some, sufficient number of participants in a different time zone, we may have another batch in the evening time, which is typically the morning time of US and Canada time zone. But that's tentative. So majorly we are running this one batch, which is 11 to 1 p.m. IST, starting on the next week, 13th of July. In this, this particular course is spread over 8 to 10 weeks, even though we have defined the agenda for 8 weeks, but sometimes many of these sessions, they spill over and we have to reserve a couple of extra weeks. So in the first week session, we will be talking about 5G core and telco cloud. Right. So this is going to be a hands-on session. Unlike my previous batches where I have talked mostly about the technology and we did hands-on only in 1 or 2 batches. What we are going to do in this particular batch is from the second session, not the first session, from the second session onwards, in every class, we are going to do some kind of hands-on. Okay, so there's some issue with the link. No problem. Let me check and share the another link. Right. So, or you can search me on LinkedIn with the name Sanjay Kumar 5G. You will find me there, or you can search Telco Learn on YouTube. You will find it there. Right. So, introduction to 5G core and telco cloud. We will be doing the hands-on from the second session onwards, and every week we will do some kind of hands-on, which is different than my previous batches. We will be talking about the 5G core network architecture, and we will be doing the configuration of these components in some kind of lab setups. So you need to follow the steps, do some lab setups, and then you will be able to make those configuration in the 5G core network architecture. We will be talking about all the protocol and interfaces in 5G core network, right? And in this scenario, we will be talking about each and every protocol message pretty much in detail at the slide what I've shown as an initial registration. Typically, I take approximately 2 hours just to explain that one procedure called as initial registration, right? And we talk about each and every protocol message, each and every information element. Of course, I cannot say that I know everything. There are a few questions which I have to go back and check those questions and get the answers for those questions. Sometimes it gets little difficult also, but we try to cover almost all those protocol interfaces and information elements in the 5G core. And in this course, we will be building those interfaces and we will be analyzing those protocols in the 5G core labs. Okay. Telco cloud infrastructure and orchestration. The orchestration also plays an important role. So we will be having a session on Magma 5G core where we will also do something related to the orchestration, NMS, and the 5G core architecture, right? So Robert, just give me a minute. I will be taking up the questions. So but once I complete this, I will be taking those questions. The open source software for 5G core, yes, we will be doing at least 3 different lab setups. We will be doing 3 different lab setups. So unlike my previous session where we did just one type of lab setup, we will be doing 3 different lab setups, and that will start from the session 2 itself. Starting from the session 2, we will be doing lab setups. We will be talking about some advanced features and security in 5G core network. We will be talking about integration and interoperability of the 4G and 5G network. And we will be talking about, how do we really implement SRS RAN, UE RAN with the 5G core network. Right, so all these things we will be doing in the week 7. And finally, we will be doing a hands-on project, which will be typical end-to-end scenario simulation of 5G network by using some open source components like Open5Gs, Free5GC, Magma 5G core, UE RAN SIM. So that is going to be in the week 8. However, as I mentioned, this may stretch to 1 or 2 more weeks. So it may go up to 9 to 10 weeks. Every week, we will be spending 2 hours. So ideally, it will become around 10-week session, 4 weeks each week, 4 hours every week. So it will become a 40 hours kind of session. So what are the key highlights of this session? This is going to be 30 plus hours of online live session by experts. So I will be delivering some of the sessions. Some of the sessions I will be bringing in some other subject matter experts. We will be having detailed protocol analysis with logs along with the lab setup. Okay. Spread over 8 to 10 weeks, every week, 2 hours. So just give me a minute. I will be sharing all these information in the next slide. Session recording. Okay. Once you join that session, or even if you're not able to join the session, we will have this session recording available for the 6 months on the web and application. Even after the session, even from my first batch, what I did around 6 months back, today also, if they have some queries and they need some information, they send me a message and I'll try to do it. And we also create some kind of group query session. So if you have any questions, any queries, I would be more than happy to take those queries in an offline session or one-to-one session, not offline, I would say, right? One-to-one session, and you can ask those queries in one-to-one session as well. Unlike my previous session, we will be building multiple labs, which you will build on your own computer or maybe on your own cloud infrastructure and use it forever. I will be sharing the best collection of reference material with lot of reference books, protocol logs, 4G books, 5G books, cloud-related books, telco, cloud, Kubernetes. So a lot of collection of good reference material I will be sharing with all the participants. Finally, we also do a resume, review, and interview preparation where I help you to, improvise your LinkedIn profile, improvise your profile, some kind of tools, some kind of AI tools, what you can use some kind of tools you can use to, improvise your LinkedIn profile or your resume. And the job assistance, I'm still helping some of the people to, get some interviews and crack some interviews. So whenever they are, there are some openings in my network, I share that, and I also help them to prepare for those interviews, and I do it for all my students. Coming to the pricing part, so earlier our pricing were very, very stringent, where we were just doing either one shot, two shot payment. What we want to do is we want to make it little flexible for the people who want to test the water and then only pay for the sessions. So the total fee of this course for 10 weeks is approximately $447. This can slightly vary. Depending on the conversions and some transactional charges. Right. So the first installment, what you have to pay to join this session is $49, which is approximately 4,999 in Indian National Rupee. Right. Of course, we have different procedures of getting the payments. So if you want to pay without GST, because some people are not able to claim the GST, I have a different way of doing it. So I will share that information in the personal message. So if you need that information, let us connect personally. Once you are done with the four classes mean approximately 2 weeks, after 2 weeks, right, you need to pay another $149, which is approximately 14,999. And the third installment, this is going to happen after 8 classes, not not 12 classes. After 8 classes, you have to pay the last installment, which is going to be the $249, and that will be approximately 24,999, including the GST. And the total fee for this course is either $447 without GST, it is 37,000, and 44,000 after GST. However, if you want to pay as a one-shot payment, we have some discounts available, which I will be able to explain in the personal chat. If you are joining as a team of people, if 2 or 3 people are joining in, I'm offering 5% discount, 4 to 7, 10%, 8 to 15 is 15% discount, and up to 15 plus learners, I'm giving a discount of 20%. So I hope that answers most of your questions. And now let me look at the chat box and take up these questions. So before I do it, I would like to, share, I'm sure you already have my details here. The another number, you can ping me on WhatsApp at 919871014894. So this is my mobile number. You can send me on WhatsApp any queries, any details. I also have a detailed program structure. Is there a Cornell? Individual sessions are little difficult to, because of the bandwidth limitation, I may not be able to do it, right? And but we can discuss it offline, right? So I have a detailed program structure available on the topics what I will cover, and I will be fine tuning it based on the content. So if you need this information, what we are going to do in each and every session, I can share this week-wise agenda with you, which can slightly vary on some of the session depending on the participants. Right. So if you need any of these information, please send me a message. On the WhatsApp, and you can do it on this particular number or the other number what I've shared. Right. So with this, let me just look at the questions. So Cornell says, is there an individual session? If yes, how much time? Okay. So there is a Cornell says, share the slides, please. So I'm not going to share these slide decks, but when you join our course, we typically share all the slides with all the participants, Ashish says, would we get any certification post-course completion? Lalita, yes, we will be sharing the certificate for completing this course. Along with that, we will be giving you some, project completion, where we will be giving you some project and you have to complete that project. So you will be doing on live working on some projects, as well as you will be getting the course completion certificate. The another one is okay, Robert says, how much for course and where is the next region of it, since I can't make it this Saturday? So tomorrow it is not starting, it is starting next week. The rerun of this, if you're not able, people who are not able to join this demo today, I will be having a rerun of this demo on Sunday morning. I will be sharing that in the group, but the course starts next next Saturday. So Don says better than the IEEE course. Okay, thanks, John. Are you connecting to actual 5G components or software emulators? So Don, it is going to be mostly software simulators and emulators. It's not going to be the real component, but as long as they are built on the cloud architecture, I don't really see a major difference in a real actual 5G component and a software emulator. So there was some. Okay, Cornell says he has a question. Okay. Now with this, I'm done with that. Okay, the hands-on, is it on individuals? Yes, we will be talking. Lalita, can I add that project to your resume? Of course, you can do it. And if you need some additional experience, some certificate from us related to the project completion, etc., we can support for that as well. So Devashi says, yes, I missed to join this on time. Yes, the recording will be available, and recording will be available on our YouTube channel. Let me share the link of the YouTube channel. Give me a minute. I am just sharing the link of my YouTube channel. Okay, here it is. So just share the link of my YouTube channel. Let me check if it works. Yeah, it works pretty well. I hope you can check it on my YouTube channel. Right. Any other questions from anyone? If you have any questions, if you want to ask those questions, you can raise your hands. I can help you to unmute, and then you can ask your questions. So any questions? If you have any questions, please raise your hands and I can help you to unmute, and then you can unmute and ask. Okay, Cornell has something to say. 1 second. Why I'm not able? Okay. Cornell, just try if you're able to unmute now.
Okay, so my question is, which of the vendor gear are we using on the cloud?
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
I mean, which of the vendor gear are we using on the cloud for the simulation?
So for the simulation, no vendor equipment. So nobody will allow us to use these vendor equipment or vendor softwares for just these kind of open trainings, right? So as I mentioned, and I've actually indicated that multiple times in my discussion, we will be using mostly the open source components like Open5GS, Free5GC, UE-RAN, SIM, SRS-RAN, etc., Magma 5G Core. We are not going to use any vendor specific products or any vendor specific softwares.
Okay, so that means we can apply the same skill that is learned using the open vendor in any other vendor in the market.
Connor, if you see many vendors, they do slightly different type of implementation. So you may not be apply this knowledge as it is, but I would say almost the concepts like 80-90% of the concept remains the same. For example, some vendor may choose to build a couple of network elements as a bundle. So they may not look like AMF and SMF as two different products, right? So the concepts, yes, they will be 100% applicable. The architecture, the structure, the deployment can vary from vendor to vendor, right? So what you learn here as a command, what you learn here as an architecture, it may not work in each and every vendor. And even if you learn one vendor product, it may not work with other vendor product. I hope that makes sense, Cornel. Okay. Another question is from SSS. Who is SSS? Can you please mention your name and then unmute yourself and mention your name first?
Yeah, hi, Shubham Singh Sishodia from here.
Yes, Shubham, yeah, please go ahead.
So I have questions like, are we going to cover the integration point as well, like between the AMF to SMF or between the AMF to AUSF UDM, and what type of configuration we like, common configuration for integration things, whatever port or like how we are going to integrate and what are the mandatory configuration on it, and like if some issues happen, okay, like between the call or between the registration, so are we going to discuss those points as well, and
Yeah.
also are we going to discuss about the logs, like what type of error we
No,
are
so
getting in
what we will
each
be doing
nodes?
when we will be setting up these labs, we will be doing the configuration of AMF, SMF, UPF, GNode B, UE, etc. Right? And we will be setting up not all, but some of those parameters which are required, mandatory parameters required for the communication. We will be setting all those things with our own hands. And then we will be testing the calls. And if something is not working, we will be doing the troubleshooting. We will be creating some kind of problems and then try to simulate those things and then trying to correct those problems, right? So yes, we will be doing those configuration with our own hands and test it, right? It may not include all the parameters, but yes, some of the major parameters we will be talking about.
Okay, like integration also we will cover, right? Like some, for example, AMF to ASF UDM. So that will also will see in our labs, like how can
Yes,
we do the
yes,
integrations?
we will see that. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, okay,
Okay. Okay.
okay. Thank
Yeah,
you so much.
no problem. So Don says, okay, he has to check his schedule. No problem, Don. You have my number. Please, feel free to maybe it's okay if you can take a screenshot of this picture. Let me just write this here. Just give me a minute. And you can take a picture of this and come back to me whenever you get some questions or some kind of. This is my number. Right? So you can send me detail message on WhatsApp or maybe on email. Email is written here info@telcolearn.com. Right? Maybe if you want, you can take a picture of this particular slide so that if you need to reach out to me, you can reach out by using this detail. Right? Any other questions from anyone before we conclude the session? If you have any more questions, please feel free to drop me a message. I would be more than happy to answer those questions in the personal chat. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining in. This video I will be uploading tomorrow morning on my YouTube channel, and you can actually check this video. And if somebody missed that session completely, I will be having a repeat session on Sunday morning. Many people are not comfortable with this time zone, so I will be doing a repeat session. So if you have joined this today, you need not to join the session on Sunday. But if you have not joined it today, or if you missed a part of it, you can join this session on Sunday as well. Thank you very much. Have a great evening. Have a great weekend. I hope to see you in the course. Thank you very much. Have a great time. Take care.